we're gonna start the class now. So you all can see the PowerPoint on here, yes?
Yes.
Okay. And at any point, I mean, this class is intended to be more of a conversation, and so I expect us to have some dialogue throughout this. And I have a few questions that are designed to make us think, but also if you have any answers or, I mean, there's nothing wrong with speaking out during this class. So please feel free to speak out or ask questions, anything kind of throughout this that comes up for you.
Participate, in other words.
Yes, exactly. All right, so we're going to start out. So this is the ABCs of communal confession, right? So the very first question that I wanted to pose here is, why is prayer communal? I want to point out that there are many instances we see of prayer in the Tanakh that are in the singular form. So we got Rebecca asking God why her pregnancy is so difficult. We got Jacob praying to God to deliver him from his brother Esau. We have Hannah praying for a child. There are many instances of
Moses asking for
so many with Moses, with Abraham, like, pick a character, and they probably had at some point a sort of a one-on-one prayer.
I'm not aware of any communal prayer in Tanakh.
So that's kind of why I wanted to bring up. So I mean, technically there was, because if you look, this is going to come up later, but if you look at the instruction for the sacrifices, and for Yom Kippur in particular, which we're going to get to. So the instructions for that.
Prayer.
It's a good point. I think that, well, not exactly, but in a way it still is communal.
Yes.
And really what happened is the shift that we see in our engagement with Judaism post destruction of the temple was a shift from temple worship and sacrifice offerings to sacrifice of the heart, of Dashab Lev, right? We have a service of the heart. And so prayer then became the replacement for the sacrifices, since we were no longer able to offer those at the temple anymore. Which, by the way, there were, I mean,
I guess,
yeah.
Partially, maybe you could say that the Levites singing during the sacrifices was prayer.
Yeah, I mean, certainly you could, and certainly, like, there are many elements in the Tanakh that you could construe as communal prayer. Even though it said that Moses and Miriam sort of led the people in this prayer, but Shirat Hayam, right? The people all sang together, and I mean, that's more of a Thanksgiving prayer than a bakasha, like a request kind of prayer.
I was kind of thinking that it's not even a prayer; it's just a song.
Well, then that begs the question: what is prayer? I suppose too, if we get down to it. Which you don't have to answer right now, but this is getting us thinking, right?
Prayer has Bruchata in front of it.
Okay, so that's a blessing. So there is a difference between blessing and prayer. Right? So that's, I mean, certainly all blessings are prayers, but not all prayers are blessings. Kind of a square and rectangle situation.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, you're not always asking for something.
That's true, exactly, right? Because there are many. So if you take a look, if anyone's ever studied the Psalms before, and you did bring up Psalms, so there are many different classifications of the Psalms, right? There are Thanksgiving Psalms. There are Psalms that are sort of meant to teach you something. There are are derived from stories, and there are Psalms that are sort of more invoking the fear and awe of God, and so there are many different ways to express. There are Psalms of sadness too, and deep reflection, right? And so just like there are many classifications of Psalms, I think you could also declassify prayers in lots of different ways. And I think if you look at where we're at today with prayers, we have sort of this balance between the keva and the kavanah, the keva being what is required of us to do, and the kavanah being the intention behind the prayer, right? Trying to strike that balance between those two things. And sometimes, well, I think what's keva, what's sort of required is there, and we're supposed to sink into it. And we're supposed to find ways to derive meaning from it, even though, and I mean, it shouldn't just, I mean, oftentimes it's just kind of by rote. It's what we're used to doing. It's what we've learned. But if you can find a way to dive deeply into the prayers, that's also what they're intended for. So there's this balance between the two. Certainly, but certainly when you look at prayers and you see like a new ending and like a nun and shuruk, right? Like anachnu, right? We, right? If you know, modim anachnu lach, right? We give thanks to you, right? We, right? All of these we and us in our prayer, all of those we's and us's in our prayers, right? So if you look through the Siddur, not just the Machzor, but the Siddur, most of those prayers that we have, Aleinu, right? Aleinu, right? And most of them are in the first person plural. Rather than individual. And I think there are a few reasons behind this. Let's pull up some of this. So let's talk about this. What sort of paradigm shift is involved in praying through the plural form as opposed to the singular? What do we think about when we think about praying plurally versus singularly? Yes. Bible?
Minyan.
Minyan.
I mean,
okay.
the explicit counting, whatever the number was determined, that one could say is a
And-
communal decision. The whole
Yes.
framework and structure changes, it becomes formal and explicit.
Okay, so let's expand on that because a minyan is certainly a really great example, right? So there are a handful of prayers that require a minyan in order to say. Basically, any form of Kaddish, right? The Kedusha out loud and the Baruch Hu, right? So if you don't have a minyan present, a quorum of 10 Jewish adults present, what happens then?
Well, it still includes whoever's around.
So you do still find a way that you still are like expected to pray, right? It's really unfortunate when that happens because a lot of times like the people who come to minyan are there to say Kaddish. And so if we can't get them a minyan, then they can't say Kaddish. And that's a very sad thing for them that they're not able to fulfill that mitzvah. But certainly it is sort of incumbent upon us to pray, right? That's something that, you know, we're expected to do in a lot of ways. And so doing that, you would pray all the other prayers. You just would not do the Baruch Hu or Kaddish or the Kedusha out loud. Yeah, Sheila.
We don't do the Kedusha to
Well,
yourself.
you know, when you pray in the plural form, but we talk in general in the plural form, even though we're doing things singularly.
Yeah, exactly.
We do it in English.
Yes.
In other words, it's not just me who wants
Absolutely.
whatever we're asking for, but we're not asking for something so much in the prayer. Yes, we are. We're allowing the inclusion of others to partake in our prayers.
Absolutely.
In other words, we're not being selfish.
Right. Okay.
Other
So let's
people also
think
have the
think
same
about for a
desire.
second. Yes, let's think for a second. What are some of the things that we like to pray for on an average basis?
Rain,
Okay.
prosperity, health,
Prosperity, health.
our
What else?
electricity to go back on.
Amen. What else?
Children,
Okay.
the health of other family members.
Yes. So healing for people we know.
Success in endeavors.
Okay. Yes.
To
So
get into
those are
schools, to get a job.
okay. Yes.
To get a
So certain.
bicycle.
Yeah. So the things that you're listing, and there's so many more, right? There's
And
peace,
God's protection.
right? We have Hashkivenu, there where you have a nu, right? Hashkivenu, right? So we have lay us down in peace, right? So we have, and prayers of thanks for the morning light, right? We have, and although that one actually going to the bathroom. Interestingly, by the way, some of those morning prayers, we don't include in morning minyan, right? We don't include modeh or moda'ani, right? That one's in a singular, right? That one's supposed to be uttered like first thing when you wake up, like before you like even open your eyes potentially, right? So that one's in a singular, right? Because I think the action of waking up is very singular to you. It's something everyone experiences, thank God, but like it's not and that is a personal experience, but kind of everything beyond that, all those things you're listing, right? Do you think you're the only person praying for those things?
No,
Probably not. No, I don't think so. So there's a lot of universality of the human condition, right? There's a lot of things that we experience in our singular forms that are universal to those in our community. And so praying for those things together makes a lot of sense from that perspective. I would also say that there's power in community, almost like a homing beacon, right? It's like all our prayers together. If we pool our resources, right? Maybe that makes it, that much stronger, and God will hear it that much more loudly, right? Than if I were just praying by myself.
There is a Mishnah or Midrash about that.
Yeah, I'm sure that there is. Yes.
About, you pray, this person prayed and nothing happened. This person prayed and nothing happened. Then
Yeah.
they got together.
Got to get them together.
And they prayed the same thing and it happened.
Right. Yes.
I can't remember where that is.
No, I'm sure you're right. I'm sure there are probably even multiple midrashim about that.
My question was.
Yes.
In communal prayer.
Yes.
I'm thinking of Amida specifically.
Okay.
It might be other things. Why wouldn't the silent one be singular and the loud one be in the plural?
Okay, so actually, when we pray the Amidah, if you look at the Hebrew language,
Yeah.
in it, it's still in plural form.
I know.
So,
Okay, well, what if you're not in a community and you're praying at home on your own? Why would you do the plural?
yeah, that's a good
because
question.
you're still part of the community.
Yes,
We want
I would say that's a very valid answer.
We're not being selfish. We're not just thinking of ourselves when we use the plural.
Yeah,
That's why we do it when we talk, when you have a speech. It's always we. We want
Yes.
this. We want cheaper drugs. We want no war.
right.
It sounds nicer.
Huya asashom aleinu, right? On us, bring peace on us. Be'al Israel, right? So, all these news, right? You look and you see the new at the end of everything, right? It's all, Eloheinu, right? Our
I got
God.
one stuck in my head and I can't get
What is
Hashamnu and all the rest of
Hashem?
those.
Well, we're gonna get to that, so it's very fitting.
I thought this was a high house.
This is, we're getting to it, yes. And so I would also say that the focus in this case is less on who's leading and more on how to empower everyone there to improve through their daily actions, right? So, the action of praying, even if you don't believe what you're saying and you're praying if you actually look at some studies that have been done on people who have a daily practice of prayer, overall, it's often the case that they tend to have healthier mental status, right? Mental and emotional state. Having something like prayer built in, it allows you to sort of recognize the blessings that you have in your life. And then you also are focusing on, the things that you want to manifest in the world. And not only are you praying for God to manifest those things, but I think you also have a role in helping manifest those things as you pray, right? Because it's not just about praying, it's about enacting what we wish to see in the world, and tikkun olam is not for God to do, that's for us to do, right? So how can we through our actions in the world help to usher in a better world? And so it's not just about praying for it, it's about enacting it, right? So there's a lot of power in communal prayer.
Then, of course, you get to Yom Kippur.
Yes.
And all of the al-Khatim.
Yes.
You may not have done all those
We're
terrible.
we're gonna get to that. Thank you. Yes. Okay. So let's just also talk an overview about what confession is, right? So the idea of confession is about missing the mark. We acknowledge our mistakes, errors, and shortcomings, and we attempt to make things better, right? So it's not just an empty action. If it is an empty action if you just say, I missed this mark, and then you don't do anything, right? If all you're doing is confessing, that's not enough, right? We're supposed to, in confessing, recognize the mistake and fix it, right? In whatever way that we can. So
Modifications.
Yes, modification of behavior.
Flexibility.
Exactly. We're meant to learn from these things that we do wrong, right? And so for Yom Kippur too, right? So in many ways, we never come to Yom Kippur having not made any mistakes, having not had shortcomings or errors or transgressions or sins, right? You know what? No one's perfect. We all and we every year and we come back to it and we always find something new that we can reflect back on and think, how can I do this differently? And so hopefully we don't keep making the same mistakes, but in having the opportunity to reflect, we can think back on what we did and just see a way to do it
I
better.
don't remember who I was reading this week. It said that the only way to do a full teshuva is to have the same situation happen again.
And make a
don't-
different choice.
And you
Yeah.
make the other choice,
Exactly.
the right choice.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So I want to point out that confession is a daily practice that is built into the weekday Amidah. It's not done on Shabbat, but right, we have right after the Kedusha, basically, we have a part where there's 2 chest strikes, right? And we have one like little paragraph of confession in the weekday Amidah. And so let's say you're
All 3 services.
So let's say you're going to all 3 in a day and you're praying all 3 in a day, 3 confessions in a day, right? Even if you only make it to 1, at least you had 1 confession in the day, right? So you have daily confession. It's not done on Shabbat because we're meant to rest and the confessional is not really part of that. So you don't do it on Shabbat, but
Confession on Rosh Hashanah. Only on Yom Kippur.
Yom Kippur is like the main confession, but we actually do it at Slichot too. So,
But that's not on
We have-
Shabbat. I was thinking about Shabbat.
well, actually, this year Rosh Hashanah is Shabbat.
I
not
know,
Shabbat.
but I'm asking if there
So we
is
don't do
a
Avinu
confession
Malkeinu.
on.
It's not that, yeah, it's what Avinu, what was that, Sheila?
We don't
We
do
don't do
Avinu
Avinu
Malkeinu
Malkeinu,
the week
yes.
on Shabbat.
Right, because it's on Shabbat, yes. We do
often
have,
don't blow the shofar for
right.
nefarious reason.
Yes, although I think plenty of reform shows would still do it.
Yeah, well, I mean,
Yeah.
the reason is,
Because it's only one day and otherwise they wouldn't hear the shofar.
That's true. That's very true. Yeah, some reform places do 2 days of Rosh Hashanah.
even
I've been at reform places that did, yeah. But it's never as big the second day. Okay, so it's a daily practice. Yom Kippur represents an opportunity for an extended communal confession, right? Because it's not just the one short little paragraph, 2 chest beats, and that's it, right? We have a lot of chest beats and we have a lot of confession that goes on, and we're gonna go through it. So I want to point out that historically the Kohen Gadol would confess the community sin upon a goat, which was released to Azazel, and the other goat was sacrificed, right? So there were other sacrifices besides that. There was the Musaf, sacrifice, the extra one. They had a bull and 2 goats. One goat was let go to Azazel and the other one was sacrificed. So yeah, I want to point out, by the way, that Azazel,
I think the one that was for a sacrifice was more compassionate because they both ended up dead.
well, that's the thing is so it says that it's released to Azazel. We don't really know what happens to it after that point. Presumably it dies in the wilderness. Azazel, by the way, is also sometimes translated differently. Some view Azazel as like in later years, like as a demon, right? Like an actual, or like a cave or something. But I mean, realistically, it was into the wilderness. And I think the idea behind it is that it's almost like tashlich, right? It's like letting your sins go, right? All the community's sins are confessed on this goat, and it's the scapegoat, right? It goes out, and we don't know what happens to it, and so like releases that unknown element, sort of releases the community's sins in a way.
Well, it's like it's a purging of anything. You want
Exactly.
to, in order to get well, you have to
Yeah.
change your thought patterns, change a lot of things that you do.
Yes. So all the confessions that we use today are held at times when sacrifices would have traditionally been made. And then the only exception is the deathbed viduy. I mean, it just depends on whatever time that is said, presuming the person who's dying has time to say it or someone to say it on their behalf. Right. So there is a particular vidui, which is a confessional that is prayed on your deathbed.
Or, yeah, Shema.
It includes the Shema.
It's part of the Shema.
Yeah, the Shema is part of it.
Okay.
Yes, yes. Very good. Yes, the Shema is part of it. So accepting that, and then, by the way, that could still even be whatever time of day it happens to be, but yes, all of those are held at times when sacrifices. So I want to point out, we have the daily practice of confession in the Amidah. The Amidah is 1-for-1, the substitution of when we used to sacrifice.
Including
Right?
Yom Kippur,
Yes.
all those extra ones.
Yes, yes. So it's a 1-for-1 replacement. So prayer is, like I said before, prayer is the replacement for sacrifice. But here we have confession, verbal confession, and where instead of the community's sins all being confessed on a goat, the community is instead all together out loud confessing all the sins that we can think of, basically, and taking responsibility for them together as a community. Okay, so I want to also talk about acrostic poetry. This is, after all, called the ABCs of communal confession. So that's a literal ABC.
Getting to acrostic, I mean, a lot of prayers are acrostics.
That's what I'm pointing out.
That's the way people could remember them before they.
That's very true. That's very true. So acrostics are pretty pervasive throughout our liturgy. Some well-known examples include the Ashrei, which includes basically it's Psalm 145, and then it has bookends on either end from other Psalms. Lecha Dodi, which was composed much later, but that one spells out the author's name, right? Shlomo Halevi Alkabetz. And there are just many, many examples throughout our liturgy that include acrostics.
A shotgun is an acrostic.
Yes, which we're going to get
And then
to.
there's some that are reverse.
I was
acrostics.
told
Yes,
that
yes.
several of the lines of the Ashrei got lost in the shuffle, but somebody
nun.
has retrieved
So
them.
only one, the nun, and some people give the reasoning behind that that's nafal, right, is to fall in Hebrew, and so we don't want to sort of fall into whatever sort of traps or whatever negativity. So some people give that reason. I'm sure it is much more likely that there was something and it got knocked out. Yeah, very, very possible.
I thought there was something in that verse that was, they didn't want to say while they were.
It could be. Oh, absolutely. There's so many
While they were
reasons.
under somebody, while they were being oppressed by somebody.
Oh, there's so many reasons why it could have been. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so the question then becomes, so what can an acrostic accomplish that makes it compelling? Hello, if you want to grab paper
That
and
you can
pencil.
remember it.
That you can remember it, exactly. Very true. Anybody else? What makes an acrostic compelling when we have that for our poetry?
It's also not only remembering it, it's like
Yeah.
a song. It becomes like a song. It's something.
It's like it becomes like a song. It's memorable, like a mnemonic device, you know? Yeah.
For me, it was the opposite.
The opposite.
The alphabet.
And it taught you the alphabet. Okay,
Because I
sure.
didn't know
It can work. It can work. It can work the alphabet. It can work the opposite way. Yes, Tybal.
I think it's 119 that gets used for memorials, but as part of what Sheila said, memory, when people then make their religious names, they know the letters in their religious names, so they have an extra connection to a particular verse that starts
Oh, yeah,
with.
that's very true, actually, yeah. When I was ordained, well, not when I was ordained, but later when I got smicha, which was supposed to be part of ordination, but wasn't because it was over Zoom. So smicha is when they lay their hands on you and they sort of confer blessings of ordination, right? That's like how it was done back in the day. And I didn't get to have that because it was on Zoom. So a year later, I did finally get smicha from the president of my seminary. And he was doing a thing where he was looking up people's Hebrew names by the first and the last letter. And he was looking up through the letters by that to give extra meaning in the blessings that he gave us. So, yeah.
This is off the subject, but my Hebrew name, Raval Barak,
Yeah.
Gematria 613.
Okay, there you go.
I figured that one out.
Sure. That's something to note is that all the letters do stand for numbers too, because in those days they didn't have a separate system for that. So yeah, there's all kinds of further meaning you can derive if you take the numbers as well as just the letters. I also think that acrostics are an exercise in creativity. So it's finding, if you bind yourself to that form of having an acrostic and you've committed yourself to going through the alphabet in order and finding words like based on where you are in the alphabet and trying to find meaning from that, you piece together something that can be so creative. If you think about the Ashrei, that's like a great example because it's going through the whole alphabet and looking all the ways that we can praise God, right? Through Aleph, Bet, Gimel, like going all the way through, right? It's an exercise in creativity. But there are a lot of really creative ways besides just Aleph to Tav, right? There's a lot of ways to do acrostics besides just those. There's backwards, there's doubles. There's spelling out someone's name. There's so many different ways to do it.
Aren't the Al-Hates a double acrostic?
They are, so we're gonna get to that.
Keep telling me we're gonna get to.
So the shorter Yom Kippur confession, the Ashamnu, is an acrostic with triple Tavs at the end, right? So
What's the reason for that?
I think I don't know, I think it really just hones
It
in on the
seals
point at the end. Yeah,
Seals it. It's a
it seals
seal.
it. It is a seal, yeah, in lots of ways, yes.
I always wondered why that.
Yeah, I mean, there can be a lot of different meanings you can derive from that. So the longer Yom Kippur confessional, the Al-Chet, is an acrostic with doubles of each letter. But it's after, it's a certain form, right? Al-Chet shechatanu lefanecha be, and then it has the letters.
Yeah, it seems to.
So we have sinned
It
before
seems to
you
be
in like,
one version of the Machzor,
yeah,
not the one we use now, but I think the one before
Okay.
that, maybe we never used it here, may have been over here. I think they had dropped one of each.
oh, I
So
don't know.
that you had a
Yeah, they
single-
do it. They shortened it at the end.
Yeah, they were trying to shorten. it.
Okay, well,
they-
yes,
So
yeah.
that instead of the whole.
Well, this turns into a,
We've already eliminated the last one about the korbanot,
right,
and they take one of each, one line instead of 3 lines
okay, yeah,
for each letter.
Is that
Yeah.
new
We get the
Malkeinu?
point. We don't
Also,
have to belabor it,
is-
in other words.
okay, so I wanted to take a look at Ashamnu. Here's the text, right? Ashamnu, baganu, gazalnu, dibarnu, dofi, avinu, vihirshanu, zadnu, chamasnu, tafalnu, sheker, ya'atznu ra, kizavnu, latznu, mararnu, ni'atznu, sararnu, avinu, fashanu, sararnu, kishinu, oref, rashanu, shichatnu, ti'avnu, ta'inu, titanu. By the way, so when you get to those 3 at the end, it does feel very expressive, right? Ti'avnu, ta'inu, titanu, right? If you like say those out loud, they all sound kind of similar to each other in a way. And so having that, it really does feel like a sort of finality to it, right? And so we strike our hearts at the end of each one of those. Now, I want to show you the translation, and it does take license here because you'll see what the translation is doing here.
Well, there's a million different translations.
We abuse, we betray, we are cruel, we destroy, right? So it's taking all the letters and it's not exact because we are extremists, right? It's taking a bit of creative license there in order to get the X in, but it's going through also through the alphabet to attempt to
It has.
do that
it's
in its,
Nowhere near the proper translation.
no, it's really not, right? So
But it's something that we understand.
it is. So
In
so
other
do we
words-
think well, here, let me ask this. So do we think, because there are numerous schools of thought when it comes to translations, right? When you're translating something, and this is something that happens across like all languages, it's not just a Hebrew English sort of thing. Do you attempt, and if you're translating something that is poetry, that has some kind of structure to it, whether it's a rhyme structure or an acrostic or something, do you attempt to match whatever the structure is as you're translating? Or do you go one for one and you try to translate something as exactly as you can from what the original meaning is? You can't often get both. It's a rare translator who's able to encapsulate both aspects of the aesthetics as well as the literal. So it kind of depends on what school of thought you're attached to. Here, I think it does come close to a lot of the meaning, but it is a lot of license that was taken with this
The
because,
translator has to make choices, and in
Yes.
making choices, they are telling you what they really think about this,
sure,
what
So
they
the
turn
que-
it into.
yeah,
I-
yeah.
I'm looking at the X and the Y.
I know,
I'll say,
yes.
I don't like either one.
No, okay, so that's the question. So if you want to take your papers,
I wouldn't know
what-
how to fix it.
What should we change any of the wording here? Do we think there are any words here that are superfluous, that are inexact, that maybe if, let's say we want to preserve the acrostic here. Are there any other sort of sinning words that we could think of that maybe make more sense to us than what's here? Does anyone have anything
we cover
besides the
we
Y and the
cover
X
them-
that you're?
We cover
Yeah?
them in the longer Ashamnu.
Okay, so we're gonna get to the Alchet too. Yeah, the Alchet we'll take a look at. I mean, it's not as easy because it's much longer.
What they are also trying to do it here is create a, you're right, they always have to make the decision, do we translate it? Do we paraphrase it,
Yeah,
or do we really paraphrase it? And I
We
think
modify it.
the movement does not want a paraphrasing so much as
right.
we want something to at least, this mimics
Mm-hmm.
the Ashamnu, okay?
Yeah, it does. It does mimic it. Yes.
One word, it's
I
one
will
word.
point out that it's not a 1-for-1, not just because there's some license in the way some of these are translated, right? Because we oppress, we pervert, we quarrel. I don't think those are they're not quite like what the Hebrew is. But also, if you look at the Hebrew, there's not a 1-to-1 ratio of the letters. And like I said, it's a triple
Versus 22.
exactly, and it's a triple tav at the end.
Which is 25.
So it's not exactly
Right.
the same. But does anyone else have
It
anything
gets
in
to the
here?
point- It
Yeah.
gets to the point, if you are going to the English,
Yeah,
then you're getting the point of, hey, this is what we've done.
yeah.
The Hebrew doesn't mean anything to most of the people. And
Right.
I hate to say it, when they were doing it 200-300 years ago, there are a lot of people who probably didn't understand it even then.
Oh, yeah.
They couldn't
Well,
translate it.
if you go back
So
far
they
enough, most people
They
were
would
illiterate.
have
So.
Yiddish. They would, the rabbi would probably teach it to them, in with
Yeah,
Yiddish.
could
or
be.
and also,
I'm sure there's a Yiddish copy of the Ashamnu somewhere out
oh
there.
yeah,
Yeah.
well, they would have it for the women, had everything in Yiddish, but you
Yeah.
also have to make it as probably our sins are the same as sins as they've had all along, but
Well, certainly some of the ways that we sin today are pretty different than if you look even, 50 years ago, let alone hundreds, right? Yeah.
I think it's interesting with the liberty that they took, even with we are extremists.
Yes.
How
Yeah.
you're really reaching for that sound of it. And
Yes.
even with that liberty that you're giving it, why not give that to the rest? Or, why would that be different
Yeah.
than what else
Sherry,
we're writing?
Sherry,
Yeah.
they were extremists when they separated, when they had the Pharisees and
Sadducees.
Sadducees.
Sadducees, yeah. Sadducees.
Anyway,
Sadducees. Yeah, whatever, yeah.
Saddeus.
I knew what you meant.
So they were extremists then.
Oh,
So
yes.
that's,
And
what the beauty of our prayers, or
Yeah.
the beauty of this, is that, my God, the sins are the same. We haven't really changed.
yeah. Well, so what's her name?
Prayers. One of
Is
the
it?
prayers.
Brooke. So I want to point out something that Brooke brought to mind here, right? Is like the license that was taken here with "we are extremists." The form here is also not the same, right? Ashamnu, bagalnu, gazalnu. Those are all past tense. We have done this. We have done this. This is all in a
Present
current
tense.
tense. So what does that do to our perception of the Ashamnu when we have that
That it's relevant to
change?
us.
Yeah. So it's relevant to, is it more, what kind of difference does it make in confession when you're saying, I have done this, or not we have done this, we have done this, rather than saying, we do this, we do that, right? So
Mhm.
what kind of difference, and what does this bring up for any of you right
Are
now?
you suggesting we should put a have in there between a lot of these
Could we, should we?
and fix the verb?
Maybe.
But I mean, I think I don't know, I think in some ways, all of these things we do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
certainly. So we're
Well,
gonna talk
reading,
It's
more about
showing
reading
that.
that
over the, if you just read Devarim, we keep doing the same mistakes all over and over again.
Oh, yeah, well, I mean, Devarim literally is a repetition of everything that had come before, so it was for the next generation.
We keep on
We're
doing
still
it through
doing it.
Judges and Samuel.
Yes, yeah.
But we're
And who
also
knows how
saying,
many-
go ahead, Ron.
I said we keep on doing it through Judges and Samuel and probably through Kings.
Oh, yeah.
I haven't been to Kings since
Even
I
when,
was probably about 15 the last time I read. Kings.
even when the kingship was established, the Israelites were like, hey, everybody else has got kings. We want kings. And God's like, are you sure about that?
It was a bad reason to get a king.
Just because everybody else has it, right? So we want that too, right?
But you know what
God's
you're,
like, yeah,
you know what
Sheila,
you're
what-
implying, though? By
yeah,
doing it in the present tense, we're also saying, yeah, we did it, but we're still doing it. And you know
Okay.
something?
Yeah,
We're gonna
to me, we haven't
continue
really
to do it.
repented, though, if it's in the.
We're just
so we
going
have
to-
the same Ashamnu, which we come back to every year, right?
We're,
Like I
we're
said.
making, in other words, by recognizing what we do
Mhm,
that may be wrong, at
mhm.
least when you're aware of things, sometimes it doesn't change, but sometimes you soften the evil
sure.
that you're doing.
And it's not even just, that we continue to do these things. It's also, the instances and the circumstances surrounding how we do those things isn't always going to be the same, right? We can still have the insult, right? We can still have the insult part of the confession. And it's not like we're setting out to intend to insult somebody, but in the course of a whole year in your life, the odds are that you could have unintentionally insulted in different ways somebody else, right? So it doesn't mean it's the same type of sin, transgression, but that doesn't mean it's going to be the same every time, right? Because it's an empty confession if we're just going to keep doing the same things. We know that we still have the same confessions as sort of a blanket, right? For all of the things we do, but they're not going to be the same every year, even if they are similar. Were you going to say something, brother?
Yeah, it makes me think of, when we're talking about this, of we want to use the present tense, so we feel like we're in it and we're still taking part of it,
Okay.
even though it's things that we've done and may do again, it's still in a present tense. When we're reliving the story of Passover,
Right.
we're still trying to live as if we were there. That's
Yeah.
what we're, told to do.
Yeah.
But that is, we were slaves in Egypt and now we're free and we have our past and we've moved past it.
Mhm.
And we're reliving the story. So why in this should we be always in the present, in the English,
Mhm.
instead of we were or we have?
It's a very interesting point. Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna move on to the al-chetz. Now, this is not gonna be the easiest for us to here. I can move this and try to do that and see if I can move this. There we go. Now you can see it. Okay. So it's kind of hard to see, al-chet shechatanu lefanecha be'ones uvratzon, right? Willingly and unwillingly, the al-chet shechatanu lefanecha be'imutz halev, right? So you see the double aleph, you see the double bet, right? So the format here is al-chet shechatanu lefanecha be, and then you fill in, right? And then there's ve'al-chet shechatanu lefanecha be, right? So we have sinned before you in blank, and we have sinned before you in blank, right?
So going to the first one,
Yeah.
what is so bad about sitting unwillingly?
I mean, I think it's covering the blanket of everything, willingly and unwillingly. Yeah.
I'm just thinking about it now. I mean, if you do it unwillingly, it's not like you.
That doesn't mean you still didn't do it.
Yeah, you did it, but like under duress. what I'm thinking, and you had no
Right.
choice.
No,
Should you, but
No.
if you did something under duress, you should still, and it was a bad thing, you should still be, you would still feel some kind of guilt for it, wouldn't you?
in other
Well,
words,
when-
It could still weigh on your soul. Here's another thing, wait, so a lot of, I want to point out the stakes for why we have confession, right? What are the stakes behind why we do this? What, if we don't have confession, what is the idea of like what the consequences could be? Like, why do we do it? Why do we have confession?
Cleanse our soul. And be
Cleanse
free
our
for
souls,
the
be-
book of life.
Right? So clean slate, cleanse our souls, purify ourselves, right? That's, by the way, you know, Yom Kippur is often referred to as like a rehearsal of death, right? We are fasting, so we're not eating, right? We often wear white. We don't wear leather, any luxurious items, right? So traditionally the burial shroud is white, unadorned, plain, right? So you know, and we're not working, we're not handling money, those sorts of things, right? And so those are things that like a dead person doesn't do those things, a dead person, right? So we're focusing instead on our souls, right? So, but it's often referred to as a rehearsal for death, right? Because I think the idea, for better or for worse, and some people really struggle with this. I think especially if you lose a loved one close to this time in the year, it can be particularly difficult. But we have like, you know, we have who by water, who by fire, right? We have that also in our liturgy for Yom Kippur, right? So the idea is that starting fresh with a clean slate and sort of cleansing our souls of guilt or anything that weighs on you, right? Could prevent you from being written in the book of life for a good year of health and life, right? And so that's sort of the view, at least traditionally, of what the stakes are, right? So if you think about something as extreme as that, like if I don't, you know, confess to everything, even if you think about it, you probably can't even think about everything you did wrong, right? We forget things so easily, or we don't know how other people perceived what we did that could have affected them in a negative way, right? If we wronged someone else, we don't always know that we did, right?
exactly.
People put on faces, right? If they want to pretend they weren't offended by something we did or said, right? But that doesn't mean that we didn't still do it, right? So this is supposed to be sort of a blanket against anything that we could have done that we could possibly think of. And it really goes through, the fullest. I want to also point out that in this translation, it does not go through the acrostic, right? It goes a little bit more exactly.
Closer to the translation.
It's closer to the translation of what it actually is, right? By the way, we have sinned against you through empty confession. There's so many things in here: scorning parents and teachers, purposely by mistake, willingly, unwillingly, hardening our. There's so many things: idle chatter, sexual immorality, openly and private. Every single like way that we can think of, right? And it goes through the whole thing. And in between all of these, ve'al kulam Eloah slichot slach lanu mechal lanu kaper lanu, right? For all these sins, forgiving God, forgive us, pardon us, grant us atonement. And it has that multiple times, because this isn't even the whole thing.
Why that's put in, where they're put in, because it's not even the third.
That's a good point.
it's not
It
even
breaks it up.
thirds.
Yeah, it breaks it
And
up in
it-
interesting ways. I think it wasn't originally part of it and it got inserted in later.
I'm just trying to
So
figure out
I don't know
God
whose decision that, I don't know whose decision that was, because it breaks it up in uneven amounts as far as I can tell, because this is a pretty long chunk.
Well, and it's not
And if
like
you-
it goes on to a completely different thing.
Well, yeah, if you look at the continued one, those, I mean, this one's shorter, this one's closer. I
Well,
mean,
no, some of us have.
Actually, this one's a little
I
longer.
think they were all, the first two are pretty even.
yeah,
and we have shortened it. I'm
Yeah.
older, so I know, I remember.
Yes, the old Machzer my father had.
okay.
Yeah,
It was,
the things were
much-
long.
This is-
Also-
It
this is
was
the-
longer.
One of the.
Yeah, it's a double acrostic. Yeah, it goes through
Yeah.
each.
the
I don't
prayer-
think so. It goes through the whole alphabet twice in a row. When Alchet, שכתנו לפניך
So
blank,
there's 40,
ואנכי שכתנו blank, right? So
it's
it,
44 verses, right?
yeah. Yeah,
The interesting thing about all of it though is, I get taken by the prayer, how you shall die, who shall die by
Yeah.
this and that. And when I used to say it, I used to think, oh, not that it was funny, but who gets killed by a wild animal? These things.
Still happens.
it happens.
Well, yeah, that's
You
what I'm
know-
pointing out. When I would teach this, I would point out to the kids, you think you're just saying some words, but this really happens because at one time
It does. It wouldn't be in there if it didn't.
not only was someone killed by a wild animal, but it was a young Jewish girl who had just been mauled by a lion in the Philadelphia Zoo. So
Yeah, there's all kinds. Look, I know, when I was in third grade, I experienced in my town a microburst storm, and there were a handful of people who died from bad weather. I mean, from a storm,
we
like
had it right
trees
now.
were
People
falling,
don't-
like, I mean, yeah. So that's the thing, is that there are so many unknowns in life. And I would say probably especially, the further back you go in history, that it's like the world, well, the world sort of always remains an unsafe place in many ways. I think even though we've come further along, there are regressions in other areas too. So, through all of the uncertainties in life, right? The idea that we have some modicum of control in what happens, because, the end of all of that is the end of all of that, from that Yom Kippur liturgy, right? Is that we say, Utshuva, utfila, utzdaka, ma'avirin et roa gzera, right? We have utshuva, right? Repentance, utfila, and prayer, utzdaka, and acts of righteousness have the power to lessen the severity of the decree, right? So, or to have the power
hope.
to, yeah.
It represents hope.
It does, right? So even though there are things that we don't have control over, we do have control over our own actions. And the idea that through the merit of our actions, we can make a positive difference in the world, and that we can bring positivity into our own lives and lives of others, I think that's something to strive for. And I think that's also one of the core reasons why confession is still valuable today. Even though people may tend to hear confession and not necessarily think Judaism right away, right? It's not necessarily something we're known for. But like I said, we do have it built into our daily liturgy, right? We're meant to take a look at our actions and recognize where we missed the mark, and take a daily opportunity to try to make that better. Now, the fact that Yom Kippur, that it goes so far to the extreme to do everything, but not just to do everything personally, but to do everything communally, right?
But it reminds you of all the evils too, like
It
by
does.
speaking ill of others. You don't even, or clever cynicism. We don't even think sometimes
Sure.
of these are bad things, or that we've been doing.
Oh,
them.
yeah.
Or
I think
eating and drinking, and
Oh,
it
yeah.
suddenly it suddenly reminds us, hey, I've been doing
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think there are the one that sort of gets me every time, I have to say, is by rushing to do evil. That one, for me, like, I'm like, who's rushing to, I mean, maybe in an unknowing way, I don't know, but it just always kind of struck me as being a little far-fetched, right? But we
Oh,
go
no.
through everything.
Oh no. Oh no.
I
You
know.
rush
There you
to
have
do
it.
I'm
evil,
sure.
you don't think you're doing it. Sometimes
I know,
somebody
that's
does
why I'm bringing
something-
it up. That's
Yeah,
why I'm bringing it up. Yeah.
it's spite. In other words,
Oh,
you're
yeah.
gonna do something because someone did something to you, instead of saying, okay, he didn't mean it, or he's stupid, but you retaliate.
Mhm.
In other words, doing evil, you rush to do evil, actually is you retaliate.
There
To
are
get
many
even.
lenses that you could take at it. Yeah. Please. What was someone talking?
Yeah.
Yes. Go ahead.
So I think that Sheila is right. You're doing בפזיזות.
Yeah.
In a hurry, you are doing bad things without thinking about it.
Right. Yeah.
And so I do think it happens.
Oh, yeah. I'm like, that's the thing is that it feels so far-fetched, but if you really think more closely on it, there are ways in which that could be construed. It's not something that you don't think about running to do evil. I don't think anyone would intentionally do that, but that's the point of
Wait.
this, is that there are so many unintentional ways that we've transgressed.
Yes.
Yeah. Were you gonna say
People
something?
try to get even.
Yeah, there's many ways that can be enacted. So the short and the long confessions here, I'm gonna move this back to the side now. Why do we have both a short and long confession, both of which are typically done at least our services? What do we think? We just compared the two of them. They're different formats. One's short, one's long. We usually do both of them, in fact. So why?
One's an
Accept the
introduction.
repetition at Nila.
What was that?
I said, accept the repetition at Nila.
Okay,
Don't do the Al-Hayt, don't ask me why.
I think it's for time.
It's not even in the book.
Yeah, that makes a certain amount of sense. But certainly during the morning service, we do. Yom Kippur morning, we do both. Well, was someone else saying something? Why do we have both? I think someone's saying that
It's
it's
an
Asham is more of an
introduction.
introduction. Okay, yes.
I think the more that we remind ourselves of what we need to do better, the better it sticks in our mind.
Good,
We're
okay,
reminding ourselves over and over that this
Yeah.
is what we don't want to do.
yeah.
We also
And if
might
you,
not,
yeah,
anytime you have something short like this introduction, in case you don't want to go through the rest of it.
okay, in case. I'm sure there are communities that just do the Asham, maybe they skip the Al-Chayts.
I don't
Right.
know when they started all of this, but if they didn't have printed ones, they probably only said the short one because that's all they could
Well,
remember.
I'm pretty sure that the two confessionals were developed independently of each other.
I bet you the long one came first, you know?
Could be. I'm not sure about the provenance of which one came first, but certainly, like I said, I think they were developed independently of each other. If you think about the format, right? The Ashamnu is very simplistic, right? It's like one word or two words, right? It's for each thing, right? And then Al-Chayt is an expansion, right? And it goes double for each letter. So the short one, the simplistic one, and the long one, the very expansive, covering every sort of lens that you could look at, like any way you could.
Without going
do
through
wrong.
it now, do you
Yeah.
know if there's anything I don't want to call it major, but anything that's in one and not in the other that wouldn't be covered by what it says, or be stretched to be able to say it's covered by it?
Off the top of my head, it's hard to think of something.
Also, sometimes by putting something into other words,
Yeah,
sometimes something gets through. I used to see this with students by
Okay.
rephrasing something.
phrasing, okay. Well, we can work a little bit on
Or making
that.
it repeated back in their own words.
Yeah, we can certainly work with that. So were there any elements of either confession that didn't speak to you? Why or why not? If you want me to go back to one of the previous slides, I can. But were there any things that didn't speak to you?
I mean,
Well, I think the
in
ones
the
that
long
didn't
one-
speak to me were already eliminated in the new prayer book. In the last
Okay.
issue or one or two editions, the ones where
Okay.
they used to have, I think it was the Al-Khayt, and they would had to do with the Korbanot.
I'm not sure about different editions, but the one that I shared was the double acrostic, the regular Al-Chayt. I don't
Yeah.
think that.
No, I'm talking about if you find an older Siddur.
Okay, I'll have to look at it.
If you find the Silverman ones, I've gotten. rid of
Silverman
them,
Machzor,
otherwise,
okay.
I gotta say,
They
Yeah.
had, at the end, they were, had to do with the Korbanot.
Okay.
That used to,
Well, the
that's
Korbanot are
why I
still
like
mentioned in the Yom Kippur
yeah,
Machzor.
there is a whole section.
There
I
is a
think we
section.
should-
No,
Yeah,
I'm
such
talking
that we
about
didn't do it.
I'm talking about after the,
It has to be
al
formatted.
Khates. There were,
Okay.
you have 3 paragraphs, and then there was an additional paragraph, al Khates, I don't remember. But it
Okay.
had to do with the korbanot, and, I know I'd say it once, and then I said, that's enough. But,
So was
if
it,
I
was it
can
something
find it,
along, was it something along the lines of like in our like inability to do the korbanot? Like I mean, because I would
I
say
think
on
it
the
was
one
not
hand,
relevant. I think the people.
yeah, because on the one hand, that's not really our fault. We are not responsible for the destruction of the temple. But
I
on the other
think-
hand,
I
Well-
think
would
what
some people
happened
say
is-
that we're responsible because it hasn't been rebuilt? I don't know.
I think
who's to
what it
say?
simply is that people got tired of all these confessions,
Well,
how many
yeah,
times can you say the same thing? And we're standing.
that's true.
Remember.
We're standing and we're beating our
So we say,
chest.
enough. We've already
Okay.
done it. This is, I don't have
Diana?
time. If I go look, I won't have, you'll be already through.
Okay,
I'll
Oh.
see if I have an older,
okay.
I think I
Oh, you're
got
gonna
rid
say-
of all the.
I want to
Moxie
hear
and-
what Ron has to say.
I mean, you asked what doesn't speak to me.
Yeah.
What I don't like is the repeating of the on every line.
Okay,
I mean, I can say what they all are without having to say that on every line.
okay,
do.
so it's
When I pray it,
superfluous?
when I pray it, when I say it, pray it, whatever it is to
Yeah.
my, in the silent, I say it only once for each section,
Okay.
and I go to the byword.
I do
Good
it
blank,
also.
good blank, good blank. Okay.
Otherwise
By
it
this,
takes
by
too
that, by
long.
the
Right,
other.
yeah, it was, right, whatever it is, yeah,
Yeah, well, the bid.
yeah, the bit, right, with
The bid in
doing,
Hebrew, the by in English.
with doing or through doing whatever, yes.
By, is it?
Bit is with or in, yeah,
I don't remember what the English is.
yeah. It translates it usually as through doing such and such,
And I
right,
have different books do different things.
right.
I can't remember what the current one is.
And it is a little ironic in a lot of ways that, we've sinned through our eating and our drinking on a day that we are neither eating nor drinking. And so, I don't know,
But-
there are ways that can
Well, you can
still
actually-
speak to someone.
You can
yeah.
sin by eating and drinking, by fasting.
Yeah, you can actually.
The fast, I don't know where the fasting came from. I know you're supposed to afflict your soul. To me, fasting isn't afflicting my soul. It's just making me feel miserable.
It's not about afflicting. It's not about afflicting. It's not about that. It's about rising above the corporeal, right? Rising above
Okay.
our own bodily needs and focusing on our souls instead. We are,
But I can't focus when I'm hungry.
that's fair. That's fair.
That's why I'm saying maybe we're sinning by not eating.
Right, maybe we are. Actually, certainly when it comes to fasting, I do want to say that, it's very clear that, pikuach nefesh is like the number one top priority. It's like the value of a human life. If you feel, at any point that it's unhealthy for you to be fasting, you are not under the obligation to fast, right? So, certainly people who are, pregnant or nursing, people who are elderly or have certain illnesses, there are so many exemptions, medications, there are so many exemptions, right? And I actually know of people who really struggle with what it means to be a Jew on Yom Kippur who cannot fast. And what does that mean for you when, so much of the focus is on the fast and then you can't do that? People who struggle with how to derive meaning from a holiday that is about, refraining from eating and drinking, and you medically can't, right?
I know that I struggle with do I email my teachers and say, I can't come to class because I'm fasting, or do I stick it through fasting and go to class, or do I not fast? And
Yeah, there are many ways that you can, struggle with that, and I don't think it's not meant to be simple, right? And it's
Jews, nothing. It's supposed to be simple.
exactly. All right, so is there value in confessing what we ourselves have not actually done? Right? If you went through that whole entire list, maybe you could find one person who's done one of those random things, right? but if you yourself haven't done it, is there value to confessing it?
Yes,
So part
because you're
That's what
covering other
community
people's
is.
doings.
Yeah, okay. So part of the idea behind the communal confession is that someone would have transgressed in one of the myriad ways that was mentioned. So do we have to confess on behalf of our neighbors too? Are we responsible for others' actions? Why or why
Yes.
not? Yes?
Yes,
Want to expand on that?
no.
No?
Yes, well, I mean, the biggest example I can think of is that, when in the Torah, the cities of refuge,
Mhm.
where if you kill somebody accidentally, you go to a city of refuge.
Yes.
And it's when the Kohen Gadol dies, that you are released, or whatever
Right.
you want to call it.
Mhm.
And the reason for that was because the Kohen Gadol, or whoever the other elders were,
Mhm.
weren't doing their job in preventing that murder from happening.
Uh-huh.
I-
Okay.
Can I say something about
Please,
it?
Helena, yes.
So we say it every morning actually, in page 12 ברכות השחר, מכלל ופרט ומפרט וכלל. So even though we didn't do it, but we are a community,
Mhm.
we are together, so we cannot take ourselves out of it. We saw it
Right.
during COVID when we were all alone, it was miserable.
Mhm.
So I think that's part of the thing why we have to do it.
Yes, there is a famous saying, all of Israel is
So,
responsible
I was just
responsible
thinking
for
about that.
for one another. Yes. Right.
We're all our brother's keepers.
Yes. Right.
Like even during, my first thought was like, oh, the mourner's cottage, like
Mhm.
I will always stand for people who cannot be there, for those that they've lost.
Mhm.
I will bear that for them.
Yeah.
So why not for this as well?
Right. Yeah. So it really gets you thinking, right? When it comes to the communal confession, it's not the same if you're like, I mean, I don't know if anyone's experienced, the pandemic, right? We had services a lot of us were attending services on Zoom. You were doing these communal confessions in like the blank emptiness of our own spaces, and we weren't physically together. Did anyone want to speak to if that felt different or if that still felt communal to you?
No, it was miserable, I must say. It was.
Okay, yeah.
Actually, I have.
You felt really lonely, and my
Ah,
fear was that I'll never see my kids or my grandkids again. Nobody knew because everybody was dying right and left, and the
Yeah.
media made it even worse. So when
Yeah.
you listen to the news and going to the hospital, I saw it in my eyes. So
Mm,
it was very difficult.
yeah.
I mean, you got two questions there. Are we responsible? Yes. Should we confess for them? I don't know what good that does.
Mhm. Well, if you think of it from this
I
perspective,
mean, they're not
let's-
there to see. that
well, no,
we're
but let's
confessing
no, but let's say
for
let's
them.
say let's say
I
they
don't
are
think
there.
that
Let's say
does.
they are there. There's a common practice in Judaism that you should never embarrass somebody else, right? That it's as if you're like murdering them, right? Like it's like not really, but like the comparison is there, right? That you should never embarrass someone, right? So for someone who has done the thing that we have not done, right? If we are confessing it, even though we haven't done it, we're enabling them to confess it without the embarrassment of being called out for
Yeah,
it individually.
I specifically said if they weren't there.
If they weren't there, okay. That's a good point. I mean, is anybody thinking of anybody else when you're confessing, or are you thinking about yourself? Just curious.
Well, on the Al-Qaeda, I'm thinking about how long is this gonna go on?
Okay,
On the
fair.
Shamnu, I'm thinking about myself.
Okay, well, we have only a little bit more here. I want to talk about the intent versus reality because that is part of it. So most of us don't intend to sin or transgress. We realize it upon reflection that we did something wrong or could have done better. We are still liable for unintended sins, but is confession enough? Right? We already
Depends
talked a
on-
little bit. Yeah?
It depends on the nature of the problem. Again, sins against God, you have to work out with God. But
Where's it gonna go?
I don't know, is it ending? I don't know. Some people got lost internet or something?
No.
I don't know.
Yeah, no, because if it ended, it would have.
No, it didn't end. I'm in control of it.
Some
Oh.
people lost electricity.
I'm
Oh,
still
okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Tonight?
Well, we'll
I-
keep going. If anyone missed it, I mean, this is all being recorded anyway, so it'll go on our YouTube. We did already touch on this a little bit, right? We talked about confession, but it's not that it is an empty confession if you don't actually have an action behind it, or a changed decision behind it, right?
Mhm.
Okay. We are meant to learn from our mistakes in the past year, positive and negative. So I wanted to talk about this. This is something that's a little bit newer in our modern era. Some point out there's too much focus on the negative. Are there things we learned in the past year that we're proud of that we want to carry into the next year, right? Should there be a positive confession as well? I brought printed copies if anyone wants a printed copy of this. I'm going to put it on the screen in just a second as well. So if you want to take a look at this, I obtained it from Ritual Wealth. I'm going to put it on the screen here. So here, instead of the negative of the Ashamnu, Ahavnu Berachnu, right? Delanu, right? Ibarnu Yofi, right? So we've loved, we've blessed, we've grown, we've spoken positively, we have raised up, we've shown compassion, we have acted enthusiastically, we've been empathetic, we've cultivated truth, we've given good advice, we've respected, learned, forgiven, comforted, been creative, stirred, been spiritual activists, been just, longed for the land of Israel, been merciful, given full effort, supported, contributed, repaired. Right, so this is one for one, an exact replication of the style of the Ashamnu, all put in positive wording, right? Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Daled, right? We're going all through and with the triple tav at the end still, right? So for this Yom Kippur, if you wanted to write anything, right? What are the negative and positive things that you would confess? And you don't have to share this out loud. If you want to just take a moment to think about it or to write it down, the negative and the positive, right? Because I think in a lot of ways, the rabbi is kind of behind this positive confession. It says that it was sort of based on Rav Kook, it was inspired by Rav Kook. It was written by Rabbi Avi Weiss, right? And the idea of having a positive confession, right? Because it's not all about what we did wrong. Certainly there's, like I said, what the stakes are, right? It is valuable to reflect on what we did wrong. And more importantly, not just to reflect on what we did wrong, but it is an inherent part of the process to actually talk to the people that we've maybe done wrong against, whether we knew it or we didn't know it, talk to them, ask for their forgiveness, right? And hopefully to be able to grant that forgiveness to others who ask it of us, right? So there are a lot of interpersonal steps to this as well. But when it comes to yourself and your personal growth, shouldn't we also think about the things we did positively over the last year? Things that we learned and that we want to bring with us into the next year?
I don't know about it. I feel
No?
ambivalent about it. I love
It's just,
the way it looked on the.
yeah,
I would like to have it,
yeah,
but by the same token,
yeah,
it's like putting laurel on yourself.
okay.
אחרים ולא פיך.
So it does feel a little foreign maybe to us to have the idea of a positive confession, doesn't it?
I like it, but I'm not sure that its place would be Yom Kippur.
Okay, so what are you thinking?
I don't know where it should go.
Well, a lot of people also point out that it's an interesting juxtaposition that we have Rosh Hashanah first and then Yom Kippur, right? Why wouldn't we have Yom Kippur first ahead of the New Year, right? Some of the sages say that like it's that in between time, right? When we have the chance for Le'ela U'Le'ela, we have the chance for our prayers to go higher and higher, right? We have the chance for reflection. We have the chance. So we that in that time that, God is sort of checking the scales and who's going to be inscribed in the book of life for a good year ahead, right? So that there's sort of that in between liminality between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, right? But if you think about it from outside of that, it does maybe feel weird that it's in that order, right? So the year starts before we have a chance to like wipe the slate clean, right? Were you gonna say something?
Oh, I was just gonna say, I think like at least for me, confessing like to the negative things doesn't distract from the positive, because like I can confess to doing something, but then like if the next thing is something that I didn't do or something that I almost did, then I can recognize like this is a win that I had.
I like that
So like
perspective a lot.
it doesn't have to be one or the other. Like I think that both can happen.
That's really perceptive. Yeah. Thank you for that. Okay, yeah. So then whom will you be approaching for forgiveness? Again, you don't have to answer this. This is just something to reflect and to think about. If you wanted to write down, if you wanted to think about, because like this is sort of the time we're gearing up towards some of the holiest time of the year, and we're meant to sort of be thinking about this. And it's hard to think about, right? Because it's not easy to zoom in on all of the small moments that we've had over the last year. How do you feel you can approach 5784 as your best authentic self? How can you bring forward the way you feel in the season of repentance to have a bearing on your actions for the rest of the year, right? I think that one is a sticking point here, right? Because like I said, we do have daily confession. It's just not the same, right? It's not the same as Yom Kippur. It's not the same, we have this holy time in our calendar, and we have many other holidays too, but this is the Yamim Noraim, the days of awe, right? It's high holidays, high holy days, right? It's even a level above that. And it can be difficult. We take so many things for granted. And it can be difficult to remember this time, through the rest of the year. You think about like when people like in the secular calendar make New Year's resolutions, right? And maybe they do okay for the first couple weeks, maybe for the first month or two, right? Then they have the whole rest of the year ahead of them, right? Do they still remember to do the thing that they set out to do? Or is it easily broken and forgotten? Right? So these are some things to think about as we head into the new year. Any last thoughts right here? I'm gonna stop the screen share. Any last thoughts or reflections before we conclude? Well, I really enjoyed hearing what you all had to share. I hope you found relevance and meaning from this session. I think it's really interesting that we have so many layers of meaning beneath the liturgy. And I think that's one of the sticking points for me, is that these are words that were very thoughtfully developed over time and synthesized in a way that continues to bring forth meaning for us today, even hundreds of years after the words were written. All right.
There, that's the best.
Someone's calling my office phone. I didn't answer it, but okay. So that's it for this class. Thank you so much for joining us, and wishing everyone a Shana Tova, a little early Shana Tova.